welcome back to the Denman Homestead podcast. This is my third episode and my second episode on beekeeping. Previously on my last episode, I talked about beekeeping 101 and an introductory into beekeeping, what you need to get started, what kind of clubs you could join, the equipment that you would need. And now today, I, as promised, have a beekeeping expert, in my opinion. He is my mentor. He is who got me into beekeeping, and his name is Gene Morrow, also known as Pops. He is my grandfather-in-law, and he lives right up the road. Do you want to say hi, Pops?
Hello, folks. If you go to YouTube, I'm hanging with Pawpaw.
Yes, he has a YouTube channel, Hanging with Pawpaw. He has a really great channel where he showcases all of his goats and his cows, donkeys, chickens, you name it, he has it all. Bees, especially bees, because today is a bee episode. So, Pops, today I just want to talk to you a little bit about your experience with beekeeping. How long have you been in beekeeping?
Probably 40 plus years. I used to help my boss that I worked for at school. He was a beekeeper, a master beekeeper. He had hives all over Liberty County. And he was an elderly guy, and I was young and stupid. And so he'd take me as a guinea pig to help him, lift stuff, move stuff around. But I learned a lot just watching him. And sometimes even on weekends, I'd go up by his house and visit with him, and we'd work on boxes or frames and stuff like that. But that was my beginning.
Did anyone in your family before you keep bees that you know of?
No, my uncle, cousin's dad kept bees. But that was the only one in our family ever kept bees that I know of.
Okay. We mentioned you have a lot of other animals. What is your experience with keeping bees in and around the same area that your animals are in, like your cows or your goats?
I've never had any problems, and I've had hives out in pastures, but I always protect the hives by putting a barrier around them so cows can't get up and push one over. I had an experience one time, that's what brought this on. First, I would set the hives in different places in my pastures. And I went out one morning to feed goats and stuff, and I saw one goat just didn't look normal. Her head looked big. Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and then I looked back past her, back in the back of the pasture. I saw a beehive laid out on the ground, just scattered out. Several boxes split apart. So I knew then what happened, and what it was, I had some heifer calves I put in that pasture just a day or two before. They get to pushing and playing and running, and I'm sure one of them knocked it over.
Yeah.
And the goat, I guess, went to investigate. And so I worked for half a day getting it all back up and make sure everybody's good, the bees are okay, boxes are all put back together, and then I went and immediately got a cow panel and encircled it and staked it down where they can't get to it.
And that's worked out pretty good?
Yeah, and it's worked like that ever since. Those that are in the pasture. Yeah.
Well, that's good that you can have, lesson learned there. So one thing that I'm very interested in, and I've not been able to master myself because I've been watching you do it, is catching natural swarms. So for everyone listening, we live on a river or a branch of a river, and Pops will put these boxes that he's made to lure in a natural swarm. And can you tell me how you do that? Like, what is your process with that?
First off, it don't have to be elaborate. I use like 4 or 5 frames.
Deep ones or?
Deep frames, I use deep frames. You could probably get by with shallow frames. But I build a box deep because if a swarm comes to it, and the box is too small, they're not gonna move in. Because the scout bees come out first. They chicken and stuff. If it don't look good to them, they're not gonna tell the swarm where it's at. It's just not gonna happen. So it's gotta be presentable to them. But anyway, I built a box just out of scrap plywood. I built it wide enough for 4 or 5 frames to fit down in it. Put a top on it, and I put an entrance in it toward the bottom. And I bait it with lemon oil. And it's just, you buy it on Amazon or wherever, lemon oil. And I put it on a Q-tip inside around the little door, and I put a cotton ball with some of it, rub all the top of the frame before I put the top down on it. And then I hang it on a tree about 6 foot in the air. And it works perfect.
Is it lemongrass or lemon, just straight lemon?
Lemongrass oil.
Lemongrass, like an essential oil?
Yeah,
like
that's what it is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so lemongrass oil on a little bit of a cotton ball inside the bait box and a little bit around the entrance.
Yeah.
And that scent, why are they drawn to that? Do you know? Is it?
I've heard it reminds them of a queen bee, but I don't know. I don't know if that's true, or it's just the scent itself draws them to it, and they discover the box.
Oh.
It may be that.
Okay. Have you ever tried any other scents?
No.
No, that's just been
That's the one I heard through the grapevine. I went from my old boss, talked about stuff like that, and I've read about it before too. But
yeah,
that was evidently been the standard, I guess.
And we've talked about this in the past, but catching natural swarms, have you noticed that seasons kind of play when is a perfect time to bait a box to catch a swarm? You wouldn't do it in the winter. Obviously, they wouldn't be out. Do you do it spring? When is your time?
Spring, early spring is the best. I put a box out. I put boxes out as early as February, latter part of February. And you don't have no bees come to it, but in March, they'll start coming to it because the queen starts her laying process early spring, actually late winter, she'll start laying again. And as that colony builds up, they start looking for more room, and that's what causes the swarm. They run out of room. That's what most swarms. And when they start running out of room, there's no room in that hive or in that colony, a hollow tree or whatever it may be. They'll hatch off another queen, and the old queen will take about half that group, or that colony, and she'll leave. And they'll find a new home. If that box is out there and they know it's there, they'll come to it. If they don't like it, they're not going to stay. If they like it, they'll move in.
Okay, so that's called a natural split then. A natural split.
Yeah, it'd be natural. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they'll swarm, and they'll move in, and then if you're lucky, which you often find them because you check your boxes often, you make those rounds, but they'll kind of gather up in a ball. They'll all come. When the scout bees find them, it's a good home, they go back and say, hey, I found a good home. They'll kind of gather up in this massive ball and kind of hang out, and then they'll all move in, right? So it would be great to be able to catch them when they're just hanging out in this big ball and you can put them in a hive, but once they've moved in, they kind of start building comb, and then you got to take it all apart and move them into a box.
I always let mine actually get in the box.
Oh, okay.
But I've messed up before by leaving them too long. This past summer, I left a swarm down there way too long. It was hot. I didn't feel like messing with them in the heat, and they built fast. When I opened that box up, it was just packed with bees, and it was very difficult. I lost the queen in that process somewhere. I lost her, and I had to re-queen that box, and they wouldn't accept that queen. So I had to take those bees and put them into a big box, one of my other regular boxes, so I wouldn't lose them,
So let's back up and talk about re-queening. So you just said you lost a queen and you had to re-queen that box of bees. What does that mean, and what's that process?
All right, I opened the box up after they're in there for several days or a week even, and they look fine, but there's no eggs, there's no larvae, there's nothing happening. They're packing in honey, but that's it. And so I waited a few more days, thinking, well, she's just slow to get going. Still nothing. So I ordered a queen, and they ship them to you in the mail, or you can go pick them up locally if you can find one. This one came from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
A Yankee bee. But she was a beautiful little bee. And I did the process of putting her in there, you know, I left her in a little cage for a couple of days, make sure they wasn't gonna try to maul her. And they seemed like they was okay with her. And she released herself, and who knows, did she leave? Did they kill her? She's not there, so.
Okay.
After a couple more weeks, I went and I searched her, and she was a marked queen, so it made it easier to find, and she wasn't there, so. Still no eggs, nothing like that, so then I took them and put them into a big box with a regular hive.
Will a regular hive accept bees from another group? They don't.
You can't just, I've never been able to just dump them in there. You take their box and you put a sheet of newspaper between the old hive, take the top off, lay a sheet of newspaper there, put a few little slits in it, and set your other box with your new bees on top of it and put the roof all back on it. Those few days it takes for them to chew through that paper, they'll get used to the scent.
Oh.
And they'll accept it.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you said marked queen. What's a marked queen?
A marked queen, people that produce queens, and I don't know how they do it, but they'll put like a little mark denotes the year. Every year has a different color, a little dot on her back, on her little back.
Yeah.
And it don't come off, and it doesn't bother her. And if it's yellow, you'll open that hive up, you see a little yellow dot going everywhere, or white, or red, whatever the color may be for that particular year. And they do it a different color per year, that way 2 years from now you go open the box back up, and if you know the colors related to what year, you know how old she is.
Gotcha.
Replace her or whatever you need to do.
So speaking of queens, if you go into your hive and you do a hive inspection and you start to see some queen cups, I haven't talked about queen cups yet, but queen cups they look a little bit different. They're longer in size. They kind of sometimes hang off the bottom or even in the middle of your frame. But if you see a queen cup forming, would that indicate something to you when you're doing a check?
I would think, my opinion is, they look like a big peanut, like a peanut hull, they look like. They're either gonna swarm, and that's usually what's gonna happen. They're hatching off a new one to swarm, or the bees themselves know the queen's not doing something right. She's failing. And they will take an egg, build a cell for it, and make a queen.
Okay. So any egg that's laid could potentially be a queen.
All eggs except for drone eggs are females.
Okay.
And they would take one of those eggs, but it has to be less than 3 days old.
Oh.
At 3 days, it starts to develop into what you call a pupa, or whatever you call it, you know. They gotta get it when it's still an egg. And they'll put it into these cells and start taking care of it, feed it and all that other thing.
And they feed it something different, right? They feel it's something called
Yeah, it's called
jelly.
royal jelly or something like that. It's a different blend of food they feed the others.
Okay, and that's what essentially
Makes
the
her
queen.
develop out more, yeah.
Wow. So a queen, when she's hatched out, is a virgin queen.
Right.
And inside the hive are drones, which are male bees. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the male bee is only in there to mate, but not with the queen that he lives with, right?
I don't know. She actually flies out to be mated. She flies her maiden flight. And there's drones, we don't see them, they're up there flying, constantly looking for a queen. And she may mate to several of them before she comes back to her box.
Okay.
That's how sometimes you get Africanized genetics brought back home.
Oh,
Be
okay.
one of them guys for floating around, you know. And she may be in a perfect box, all the drones perfect, the good bees, but there may be one of them guys where mates with her when she's out.
Wow.
Then she flies back, but the drones, she lays drone eggs for that very purpose. They'll all go out flying around too, trying to mate.
But the only purpose for a drone then is just to mate.
Is to mate. He does no work. Come winter time, they kick his butt out,
And then she'll hatch more drones.
and she'll hatch off more in the spring. They're not gonna feed somebody that don't work.
Is that like a typical male?
Yeah, except we don't get kicked out, hopefully.
I just had to say that. Okay, so once a queen's mated, she's mated for life. She doesn't have to continue to remate. She's got everything she needs for the life of her leg aim.
I've heard both. I've heard that's true, and I've heard that they go back out whatever they need to. I don't know. I couldn't say it for a fact.
Okay, now there are some people that will clip the wings of a queen,
So she can't
so
fly.
she cannot fly
Right.
out. So
So it make you think, one time's good enough.
yeah,
These guys that raise these queens, they have these queens, you buy them, they're already mated. I think they made them in like a screened-in structure, so they know what she's mating to.
okay.
And then if they want to clip their wings, I guess they can, she ain't gonna go nowhere, keep her from leaving.
So when you order queens, do you order a specific species of queen? Because I know that there's like Russian and Carnolian and Italian and different types of queens. Do you look for is there a species that you particularly gravitate to as far as like more gentle bees, or what's your thought on that?
One year, you and I bought, they were Canolian, right?
Yes.
Bees,
Mm-hmm.
good bees. I think very gentle bees.
They were very gentle bees.
Yeah. Italian bees is what I normally have. That's what we normally find in the woods around here is Italian bees. But and I'm happy with them too. I think they're a little bit more not aggressive in a sense, but they can be more than the Canolian are, But as far as production, I don't know the difference. I couldn't tell who produces the most honey or not.
I feel like, because I've bought, I think 2 or 3 nukes now, packages of bees. The ones that I have now are the ones that you and I have gotten in a natural swarm. I feel like the ones that are more gentle or even like farm raised are not as hardy. Like, it's kind of almost like the survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I know the ones that I have out there are really strong hives, but they're also a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just because they have more of a survival gene or genetic or what it may be.
Very well could be, coming, living in the wild, and very well could be.
So how often do you do hive checks?
I don't do mine often enough. I do them in the winter, checking them in the winter, make sure they got plenty of stores. Like in November, I'll check, make sure they got plenty of stores. Plenty of honey.
Do you do a quick check? So because isn't it true once the temperature drops?
If it's cold, I don't open them up.
Oh, okay.
I do it on a warm day.
On a warm winter, so we're in Texas.
Yeah.
So to give everyone, if you're in
we get
Montana
warm.
or something, don't open them in the winter, right?
Right, we get warm days, but we also get cold days.
Yes.
But yeah, open them on a warm day, and I'll open up maybe a couple of boxes, make sure there's plenty of honey. That's the main thing I'm looking for, is they got plenty of honey. I'm gonna feed them anyway.
Okay. What do you feed them?
I feed them sugar, with pollen patties, substitute, and I make like a candy. I put a tray full of, like say 8 pounds of sugar into a tray. You got the big bag of sugar. And I'll cut up some pollen patty in little chunks, and I'll pour just enough water to make it harden up, not enough to make it soupy. And I'll even put it on paper plates, and just open the top up, just set a couple of paper plates in there, that on it, and put the top back down.
Okay, and they just kind of crawl up there and get it and eat it.
Yeah, and they'll come up right there, and I've got some feeders I built that work real good too. I can actually, it's got a hardware cloth bottom on them, same size as the boxes. And I'll put a piece of newspaper in there and pack that stuff on top of it and leave both ends, like so much on each end open. And they'll come up through there and eat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Almost like a little hammock, but not a hammock, but the hardware cloth is not covering the entire base, just.
Yeah, it covers the whole base. That holds your newspaper up with the sugar on top of it. Sugar's pretty much dry and hard when you put it on there,
Okay.
And they'll come up through the openings and
Gotcha.
get all they want, go back down.
Okay, I see.
Works good.
And so you feed that in the winter. Do you feed any other time during summer or spring?
No, unless it's hot and dry. Like with this past summer, we had like almost a drought. There was no plants, nothing going on, no water, hardly no, there's no pollen out there. There wasn't hardly no nectar or nothing. I fed them,
And do you feed them the same that you do in the winter, or you feed them like a syrup?
Syrup is probably better, but problem with syrup sometimes, unless you do it inside the box, you'll draw bees from other places will come to it. And the next thing you know, you got robbers
Yeah.
coming in.
Let's talk
So
about robbing.
I'd rather put it on the inside so they don't,
Yeah.
no, sir.
So robbing.
Oh yeah, robbers are horrible.
Robbing, I did talk a little bit about robbing. I
Horrible.
lost a hive to robbing. It's hard to stop them once they, it depends on when you catch them too, because.
Yeah, and they'll show up early, late, it don't matter. When they show up in force. And they can literally wipe out a hive in no time. Because they'll kill anybody that gets in their way. Getting that honey, they'll kill the queen in there.
Oh, yeah.
They just don't care. And people say, oh, what kind of bees are they? They're regular bees, but they're coming from a colony somewhere that's running low on food. And they're out looking for whatever they can get. You know,
Right.
your house has got groceries, mine don't. You know, I'm coming to your house, you know?
Right.
That's what's going on.
Yeah. Do you notice that robbing happens more in a certain season, like before winter, like if they're gonna?
I think more in the fall, I think.
More in the fall getting
I think so,
prepared?
yeah. So they kind of store it up.
If you see a bunch of bees out there fighting and flying, because it does look like almost a swarm, because there's so many bees in the air, but the difference I notice is that if you look at the hive, there's dead bees all on the ground, they're fighting at the entrance, they're stinging one another, almost like tussling.
Yeah.
What have you done in the past to try to get them, have you done anything to try to get them to stop?
I'll throw a sheet over the top of them or a blanket,
Okay,
cover up the whole hive. That doesn't stop what's happening there, but it'll stop more from coming, because they're steady coming.
right,
And that'll stop that, and then as the day wears on, it gets late, and take it back off, and what's left, they'll leave. You know, they're not gonna stay.
Yeah.
But that'll stop what's gonna, I've built, my own version of entrance, you reduce the entrance to, down to real small, where they can't just fall, you know, all of them go in there like that. But I put a board across the front, completely cover it up, except for there's a space my bees can come up and come out. Robber bees can't find their way in like that.
oh,
Because they're looking for that entrance, and they're not looking to come up a hole here and go down.
oh, I see.
But the bees that live there know how to come up and go out.
Mhm.
My two houses at the house have those on them right now.
I want to switch gears. Have you had to move an established hive from one place to another? And if you have, how do you move them? Box by box? Do you ratchet it all together
Yeah,
and just
yeah, keep them all together.
keep it all together?
And it's hard. It's hard. And they can get upset too.
Yeah.
But close up the entrance where they can't get out. Ratchet down where they can't get out and get it moved. And open up the entrance and run. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna be angry.
Yeah.
Problem with moving them, same way with a trap out of the woods. And you talking about what they're gonna move a trap as soon as they get in there. And that's good. You're not gonna lose no bees that way. If you let them stay very long, they establish that as their home. Then when you move that box, any bees out there foraging, they're gonna come back to that tree,
They're home.
their house, but they're not gonna, they're just gonna cluster to that tree. I found I would go back at night, because I've had this happen many times, because I leave them there a few days or a week or two or even longer. I'd go back at night with a bottle of a spray bottle with sugar water and spray them. And they're only 6 foot in the air. I don't put my traps high. And take a bucket with a lid or a jar with a lid and just sweep them down in that jar, put the lid on it, go back to the hive where it's at home, raise the top and dump them in there, put the top back down. The next night there won't be many there. There'll be some. I'll go, same thing, about 3 nights I've got them all. Move back to the new home.
Right.
And they got the sugar water on and the bees are in there, we'll clean them up.
It doesn't hurt them.
No.
That's good. That's good. Because I have to move my 2 hives. Those trees are dead, so we're gonna have to move those soon. Yeah, it's gonna be.
Ratchet them down and get the tractor with a bucket back, pull up there to them, put them in your bucket. Go where you're gonna go. Close their entrance up good.
Have you had any like personal disasters with stinging or getting them in your suit or had any problems with?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I've got them by shirt before.
Oh.
I wear a bee suit. Like you see people all the time out working their bees.
They're crazy. They're without.
Well, I think, yeah. Usually a swarm that's swarming right then will not sting. They're pretty easy because I've heard they don't have a hound to protect yet, and I've heard well it's because before they leave their hive to swarm, they fill up on honey, for the trip, and so they're not inclined to sting. I don't know. I don't take chances.
I don't either.
I don't want to be stung. I'm not allergic, but I've been stung several times. But sometimes it's itch like crazy, swell up a little bit,
Yeah. I think I have like a moderate reaction where if I get stung, it'll swell up real bad and then it'll migrate over a couple weeks. If I get stung on my pinky, it'll swell and move up my elbow and then up into my shoulder.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy getting stung either. So what does it mean when beers? I don't know why I have such a hard time putting this word together. When bees are bearding, if you see.
Yeah, they hang all down underneath the hive.
Yeah. What's the difference between bearding and then you think they're gonna swarm? Maybe.
That could be maybe even a sign that they're thinking about it. But bearding is usually because it's their box is full, it's hot in there, and they start coming outside and hanging and cooling off.
It looks like a beard.
Yeah, it'll hang down below the box. Yeah.
Yeah, just in one big clump.
And that could be a sign they're going to swarm because they're filling up.
So would that be a good time to check your hive and maybe put another box on if they've.
That's what a lot of people do, I think, is add another box, and even vent your box.
Vent your box?
I could take, like my lid, and take a nice popsicle stick. It's that thin.
Prop it up a little?
And you just raise it up and stick it right in there so they can vent that air out quicker or easier.
Okay. So speaking of adding another box, when you open up your hive and you look, what would be a sign for you to look for as far as in frames go if you need to add another box? Let's say you open the top up and your box, on the one that you can see up on the top, only has about 4 or 5 frames that have drawn out comb or some honey. Would you wait to add another box until more frames, or when do you add another box on top?
If I open mine up and I've only got 1 or 2 frames left open or still bare, I'll add another box. If I got 4 or 5 of them, I won't, because if you make too much space, you take a chance on getting wax moths in there or something. They're looking for a place so they can lay their eggs, because they're not going to be able to lay them where for the egg, where the bees are all gathered,
Yeah.
But if you got an open box up and there are a lot of frames open, that's where they go. And that's one of the worst things you can have is wax moths.
Yeah, and pests and things like that. So
Yeah.
if you open up your box and you do a check and you do find that there's evidence of wax moths or beetles, what have you done to help get rid of those? Do you spray them? Do you roll them in sugar, or like do you do a natural
I don't
approach?
think sugar will do anything with wax moths. I think if you got wax moths, you better start trying to move some bees out of there to a fresh box and without taking the moths with them, because the beetles themselves, you buy little beetle traps and put cooking oil on them and put them between the frames on the corners, and that'll get a lot of them. And bees will chase a lot of them out. Wax moths, if they get started, I don't know if there's a cure for wax moths. Because they hatch out by the thousands and they start boring all through your comb.
Oh,
It's
the worst.
just leaving like a spider web effect all everywhere they go.
Can you reuse those frames later? Do you need to freeze them? I've heard you could.
Yeah, I freeze all my frames.
Okay.
I have a freezer out there in my big room, and I take all my frames and I bring them in. I might do it that day, but before they go back on another box, I will freeze them for like 2 or 3 days.
And that just basically kills off any
That
pests.
kills anything that's in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't really necessarily have to. I mean, unless it's really nasty, you can leave a frame intact, and the other bees will clean it out, right?
Yeah, they will clean up most frames you put in there. Yeah, I guess as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
They do.
Okay. Let's see. Do you ever sell your honey?
No, it costs too much to ship honey.
Yeah.
I sold 1 bottle, 1 jar.
1 jar.
And I didn't want to sell it. A lady wanted a jar. She sent me money to me before she ever asked. So I take a jar and I'd go out to the post office and I'd do all the stuff to keep it from getting cracked and all that. And it cost as much as she sent me just for shipping. Yeah, it's not worth, and they can buy local honey, you know, a lot easier than they can buy honey from down here.
So you don't raise bees necessarily to sell locally or at farmers markets?
Bees is kind of a hobby to me, you know, it's just a hobby. I don't raise them to make money. I don't try to make money off of them. The honey I do collect or just use it around the house for us or family or whatever, you know.
So I know how I collect honey or harvest honey. What setup do you have whenever you harvest honey?
I have a extractor. It's only 2 frames, small, and I'll bring the frames in, and I use a electric knife to cut the tops off.
And it's heated, correct?
Huh?
It's a heated knife. So
No, it's not heated.
It's not heated.
It's just a regular knife. You know, blade go back and forth.
Oh, like a fillet knife,
Yeah.
like fish.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I just cut the tops off and put them down in the extractor and crank them out, you know.
And it spins it real fast.
Yeah, pretty fast, yeah. And I'm going to do 2 frames at a time. And then I'll take those and I'll put them back into a deep tray because there's still going to be some drippings coming out of there, you know, you can still use. But what doesn't drip out, I'll give it back to the bees. You know, and they'll clean it up. It's good for them to get the honey out of it.
Yeah.
And they'll clean it up.
Okay. So you put your 2 frames in the extractor, you spin it, and it collects at the bottom, and I guess there's a spigot. You just
There's a
open.
spigot on the bottom, and I got strainers. Everything's stainless steel. And I sterilize everything. You know, I put the bucket below there, stainless steel bucket with the strainers in it, and I open the spigot. It comes through the strainers. And from that point, I just go straight to the bottles with it.
Okay, so it just basically filters out any wax or, you know, big chunks of.
Now and then you'll have a little bit of wax debris in it. It ain't gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
It'll
Maybe
spread
like-
on a biscuit.
Yeah, if you got like a dead bee or something.
Oh,
that's
no,
in
yeah,
it, it'll
it gets
catch
all
it.
that, yeah.
Do you ever try to keep the honeycomb intact and just have chunks of honeycomb? Have you ever done that?
No, I never have, because the frames I use have the plastic backing, you know.
Okay, not the open foundation.
Right, do not the open.
I've always been kind of nervous to do this because I just feel like they'd make a mess. Because a lot of times your frames have to be just so together, and if they're a little bit apart or a little bit too, you know, then they kind of can make a real big mess making their.
The first time I ever extracted honey, and I didn't have an extractor, I just scraped it.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We just hold it up and scrape it with a spatula and just let it
Yeah.
all kind of run
Yeah.
down. But I don't get to keep the problem with that is when you uncap it and you spin it, you get to keep the wax comb
The
intact.
bees have an easier job coming back when you put it back in there, because it's already basically built.
Right,
All I gotta do is start storing it, clean it out, store it, start put a top on it, you know,
right, yeah,
cap it off.
yeah. And the way I do it, I just destroy them.
I'm not saying though,
Yeah.
so I didn't have no other way.
Yeah. So maybe one day we'll get an, or I'll borrow your extractor or something. Okay, so
You could always borrow my extractor.
yeah, okay, I'll do that. Have you ever had an Africanized hive? And if you, how do you know about Africanized?
I think I did, and I'll say that I caught a swarm once, and they were aggressive even when I caught them. And so I didn't want to bring them home. I didn't want them around the kids. So I left them down there in the pasture. And you could drive up in your truck by this, they would come out and just swarm your truck.
Mm.
I sat there with my windows up watching them hit it.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I told Daniel, I was telling Daniel about it. He said, Dad, I work with a beekeeper. And he had told him about it. And he said he would come and get them. He would requeen them. And he did. He come and got them. And they fought like crazy.
Mm.
He was all geared up. He smoked like crazy down there. And he had a vacuum.
Oh,
I've never used one. He had a bee vacuum. He vacuumed them all out of there, got caught the queen. But they fought that man the whole time he was there.
wow.
And anyway, he took them and left. And I don't know if he made it or not. He told Daniel the queen didn't make it. But so I guess he requeened the others. And then we caught a swarm once back in the early days. We're playing paintball or some kind of game. I'm sure it's paintball. And I'm hiding in these trees, and I hear something, and I look around, I see bees coming out of a little hole in this tree. It wasn't real big around. So I had this flashed idea. I said, okay, I'll cut this tree down, I'll have me some bees. And I went back with my trusted friends, Kenny and some of them, that bad company. We cut the tree down, we stapled, and they were trying to sting us all the time. And it did sting us. And we stapled screen wire over the entrance and over both ends of the tree, because I cut into the hollow. And 4 or 5 of us got a hold of that tree and we carried it out to put it in the back of my truck. And we went across this fence, an old fence, and it pulled the screen off. And bees come pouring out, and everywhere Kenny was shining the light, Kenny was holding the light, big mistake there. Everywhere he shined the light, didn't go down the light like a beam, like a radar. It sting whatever at the end. Troy, he's running across the field, and he just hit him on the back of the head. He said, "Get the light off, get the light off."
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I give them away. I had to get rid of it. And I told a story about that one time. A guy got a divorce not too long after that. I figured the bees caused the divorce. But yeah, we got hold of some bad bees before.
Yeah. Wow. And sometimes you can just requeen. If you can find a queen, you can just kill her and put a gentler queen, and then they'll adapt to her.
In time, when she laid enough eggs to replace those, plus her demeanor means a lot. If she alerts real quick or whatever, like the Africanized bee will, can cause problems.
Well, that's very crazy and interesting to me, the way that they can just calm down depending on how she is.
Yeah. Do
you use queen excluders in your?
I have them. I've never used them. I've never had a problem with her going up in the top.
Yeah. So the reason for queen excluders would just be to keep her down with her eggs and not
right.
lay
Now
eggs.
let her get up in where the honey and stuff are, or up the top. Yeah, I've never had to use them. I've got them in case I need them, but I've never had to use them.
Do you use just one deep for her, or do you use 2 deeps for her?
I use one deep and one medium.
Okay.
For the brood.
You just leave those alone.
Yeah.
In the wintertime, or when you do harvest, do you have a specific amount of honey that you'll leave for them? Like if
I leave the whole box.
Okay, so you have 1 deep and 1 medium and
a medium for them.
A medium for them. Okay. So
there's 10 frames in that medium. And when I get down to that, I make sure they're all full. If it's not, I will add some I've already taken off back in there. I want them to have 10 full frames.
Okay, specifically just honey.
Yeah.
And anything over that you'll harvest.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
I think that's what I do too.
And talking about swarms a minute ago, I start in February putting traps out. The first swarm I ever caught was on March the 10th. So you see, it's pretty quick. The same box caught another swarm on May the 10th. 2 months exact.
Wow.
Where they come from the same colony somewhere, a big colony. Last year was a bad year for swarms.
Yeah, it was so hot and dry.
Yeah, and then plus we had that freeze the year before. I think probably killed out a lot of wild bees.
I lost 1 hive in the freeze, and then I lost another hive last year.
I did too. I lost 1 in the freeze and 1 during the summer.
Yep. Now I'm down to 2. So hopefully this spring, maybe I could bait a box with you and we could get me another hive.
Yeah. I thought about, even for the video, just going and buying another nuke.
Oh yeah.
And showing how we do that.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about nukes. You know.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we covered a lot. Do you have any special like equipment that you use or you take out with you every single time you go, as far as like beekeeping equipment?
I wear my suit and I take a smoker.
That's it?
Yeah.
You don't need any like things to pry them open with?
Well, yeah, I take my little hive too. Yeah, you need it to pry them open, you know.
Because they stick together.
They will stick them together.
That's propolis, right?
Yeah,
propolis, and it's like
it's like a glue.
It's like a gum or like a glue. It's even like kind of concrete. You have to chip that stuff
you
away.
gotta chip it away sometimes.
Yeah. they stick it together to kind of cover up any holes or gaps or.
Yeah, they'll seal their hive up with it, yeah,
And then you got to break it open. And
Yeah.
they got to do it all over again.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming on as my expert beekeeper. You are. You inspired me, and you know, I just appreciate all of the knowledge that you have, that you've shared with me. And I was telling everyone that you're my beekeeping mentor. That if I need anything, you've always been there to help me. And I really enjoy our adventures going to go get bees and doing that with you. So thank you for coming on my podcast with me today, and I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Okay.
How long was it?
You cut mine off, bud?
It was like 40 something minutes, 42.